Imagine this. One morning you look in the mirror, and the person staring back isn't you anymore. Not because you've changed too much, but because somewhere between heartbreak and failed attempts to learn English, you lost yourself. But if that mirror could speak, what would it say about you today? This is my story from Denmark, where I lost love, lost my voice, and slowly learned to find it again, one word at a time. The day I stopped recognizing myself. It started on a cloudy morning in Copenhagen. The kind of morning when the sky looks like it forgot how to smile. I stood in front of the mirror, toothbrush in hand, staring at a face that felt like a stranger's. My eyes looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too many invisible thoughts. I whispered a simple English phrase to myself, "Good morning," but it sounded wrong. My voice cracked. The words came out heavy, unsure, almost like they didn't belong to me anymore. That moment hit me harder than any heartbreak, because it wasn't just about losing someone I loved. It was about losing the version of me who used to believe, I can do this. I realized I hadn't spoken English out loud for weeks. Living in Denmark, surrounded by a mix of Danish and quiet small talk, I somehow built a wall of silence around myself. Every time I tried to practice, a voice in my head whispered, "You'll sound stupid. Don't even try." And that's the funny thing about fear. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It waits. It grows roots inside your mind, until even simple words like hello start to feel like mountains. I began avoiding conversations. I'd nod, smile, pretend I understood everything. But deep down, I missed the sound of my own voice in English, the rhythm, the melody, the confidence that once made me feel alive. You know what's worse than forgetting vocabulary? Forgetting how it feels to speak without fear. That's what I lost. Not my grammar, not my accent, my courage. That day, standing in front of that mirror, I didn't see a learner or a dreamer. I saw someone hiding. And maybe that's where real change begins, when you finally admit to yourself, I don't recognize this person anymore. So I made a promise right there to bring her back. Not the perfect version, not the fearless one, just the one who dares to try again. Coffee, cold air, and Danish silence. Copenhagen winter has a strange way of humbling you. The air feels like glass against your skin, sharp and honest. That morning I walked to my favorite cafe, a small place near Nørreport station, where the smell of fresh bread always dances with the sound of clinking cups. I ordered in English, soft and careful. "One cappuccino, please." The barista smiled politely, replied in perfect Danish, and I froze. My mind translated nothing. My lips didn't move. I just nodded and smiled back, pretending to understand like a ghost among people who belonged. I sat by the window, watching snow fall like slow-motion confetti. Around me, Danish voices flowed easily, calm, musical, filled with laughter that somehow made the silence inside me louder. I wanted to join in, to say something, anything. But every time I opened my mouth, doubt wrapped around my throat like a scarf too tight to breathe through. You see, when you stop using your voice, even language begins to forget you. I used to love speaking English. It made me feel connected, capable, curious. But in that cafe, surrounded by a language I couldn't follow and an accent I was too shy to use, I felt like I'd misplaced my own identity. And maybe that's what loneliness really is, not being alone but being unheard. That as I sipped my coffee, I thought about how I used to practice English back in Vietnam, watching movies, singing songs, laughing at my own pronunciation mistakes. It used to be fun. But now, every word felt like a test I was too scared to take outside. A little boy slipped on the icy pavement, and his mother laughed gently, helping him stand again. I smiled. That simple moment hit me. Maybe learning English, like walking on ice, isn't about not falling. It's about laughing, standing up, and trying again, even when it hurts your pride a little. That thought stayed with me long after the coffee was gone. When your voice forgets you, there's a strange moment that happens when you open your mouth to speak, and your voice betrays you. It trembles. It hides. It sounds like someone else's voice living inside your throat, scared to come out. That's what happened to me one afternoon when a Danish colleague asked, "So, how's your weekend?" A simple question. Easy, right? But my brain froze like it just hit a language traffic jam. My English words waited in line, but none moved forward. I smiled awkwardly, muttered something like, "Good weather," and wished the ground would swallow me whole later. I sat on my bed replaying that tiny conversation in my head, again and again, as if overthinking could fix it. But it didn't. It just made me realize something deeper. My problem wasn't English. It was fear of sounding wrong, of being judged, of being that foreigner who can't speak fluently. And you know what? Fear is sneaky. It doesn't just steal your words. It steals your confidence, your rhythm, your very sense of belonging. The moment I began to doubt my voice, it began to doubt me back. There's even a term for this: language anxiety. Psychologists say that when we feel embarrassed or pressured to speak a second language, our brain switches into a kind of emotional lockdown. The amygdala, the part of your brain that handles fear, fires up, blocking access to memory and fluency. Basically, your brain doesn't care about grammar. It just wants to keep you safe from humiliation. So when I said, "Good weather," my brain wasn't lazy. It was trying to protect me. But that protection came with a price: silence. That night I stood in front of the mirror again. "Why are you scared of your own voice?" I whispered. The reflection didn't answer, but her eyes looked tired of hiding. I realized something powerful in that quiet moment. If I wanted my English to come back, I had to stop running from the sound of my own words. So I promised myself, no more running. No more hiding behind polite smiles or nodding in fake understanding. My voice deserved to be heard, even if it shook. And that was the beginning of a new kind of courage, not loud, not perfect, just real. The science of silence. Here's the thing no one tells you. Silence can feel safe, but it slowly eats you alive. I learned this one gray afternoon at the library in Aarhus, when I was surrounded by books written in English, Danish, even French. And yet I couldn't bring myself to speak a single word. I wanted to ask for help finding a book about confidence. But instead I stared at my phone, pretending to search. Pretending that was my new fluency. Later that night, I began reading articles about why people freeze when speaking a foreign language. That's when I stumbled on something called language-induced anxiety. It's a psychological phenomenon that happens when your brain confuses speaking out loud with being in danger. Imagine that your brain literally thinks you're under attack just because you said, "How are you?" with the wrong intonation. Neurologically, it makes sense. The amygdala fires up. Cortisol floods your body, your throat tightens, and boom. English feels like a survival test instead of a skill. Your nervous system isn't broken. It's overprotective. It's trying to keep you safe from embarrassment, from judgment, from that memory of when someone once laughed at your accent. But here's the paradox. The more you stay silent, the louder fear becomes. Silence doesn't protect you. It trains your brain to believe that speaking really is dangerous. Every time I chose not to speak, I was teaching my nervous system the wrong lesson. You see? Staying quiet keeps us safe. So I started a tiny experiment. Each day I would say one English sentence out loud. Just one. Sometimes while walking to the bus, sometimes while washing dishes. Today is cold. I feel tired. The sky looks lonely. First it felt silly, like talking to invisible friends. But slowly something changed. The words stopped trembling. My voice began to sound like me again. You see, silence might feel safe, but it's also a cage. And the only way to escape it is to speak. Even when your voice shakes. Even when no one's listening. Because every whispered word is a rebellion against fear. That night I whispered to my reflection again. "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll talk a little louder." And she smiled. The 5-minute mirror ritual. It began as a joke. A desperate experiment to feel alive again. One morning, instead of scrolling through my phone, I stood in front of the mirror and said, "Hi, how are you today?" The woman in the reflection hesitated, then smiled awkwardly, like she didn't know what to say. But I kept going. I asked myself questions in English. What's your plan for today? What are you grateful for? What scared you yesterday? For the first time in months, I answered myself out loud. At first, it felt ridiculous. Talking to the mirror like a lonely actor rehearsing for a play no one would watch. But 5 minutes later, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. My tongue loosened. My brain stopped judging every word. I realized that when you remove the fear of being judged by others, your voice finds its rhythm again. This little ritual became my morning therapy. 5 minutes. Every day. No script, no rules, just talking. Sometimes I practice small talk, ordering coffee, introducing myself, describing the weather. Other times I confess things I'd never say out loud to anyone else. I'm scared I'll never be fluent. I miss my old self. But I'm still trying. Here's the psychology behind it. When you speak to your reflection, your brain processes your own face as a safe, familiar listener. It tricks your nervous system into calmness, turning fear into curiosity. Gradually, the brain rewires itself. Speaking is safe again. After a week, I noticed something subtle but powerful. I stopped avoiding eye contact with strangers. I started greeting my Danish neighbors in English, without rehearsing in my head first. And when I made mistakes, I laughed instead of apologizing. That's when I realized The mirror wasn't my audience, it was my teacher. It taught me how to listen to my own hesitation, how to forgive my pauses, and how to fall in love with the process of trying 0.5 minutes a day. That's all it took to meet myself again, one sentence, one smile, one brave breath at a time. Tomorrow, I told myself, maybe 6 minutes. Learning to listen again. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I realized something strange. I had spent months trying to speak English again, but I had forgotten how to listen. Not just hearing words, but feeling them. The rhythm, the pauses, the tiny emotions between syllables. So I decided to start over, not with grammar books or native accent videos, but with something simpler. Listening like a child again, I began with slow English podcasts, voices that breathed between sentences, that didn't rush to impress. I closed my eyes and just listened, not to understand every word, but to notice the music behind it, the tone, the flow, the warmth. And that's when I learned something powerful. Your brain doesn't learn a language by memorizing. It learns by mimicking energy. Science backs it up. Studies from Cambridge University show that our brains respond to rhythm and tone before vocabulary. That's why babies understand comfort long before they know the word comfort. So I stopped pressuring myself to catch every word. Instead, I started feeling the voice. I played an English story while cooking, cleaning, walking, and something magical happened. My ears began to wake up. Words that used to sound blurry became familiar, friendly even. I could suddenly predict what came next, not because I memorized phrases, but because I understood the emotion behind them. Sometimes I even repeated whole sentences out loud, mimicking the voice exactly, the pauses, the sighs, the laughs. Felt like singing, not studying. And the best part? My speaking improved without me forcing it. My tongue started to remember what my ears had relearned. That's when I realized, maybe the secret to speaking fluently isn't talking more, but listening better. Now, whenever someone speaks English to me, I don't panic about understanding everything. I just listen fully, deeply, without fear. Because every time I listen with curiosity instead of shame, my brain whispers, "See? You belong in this language too." And that whisper is the beginning of confidence. Love comes back as confidence. Confidence doesn't come back with a bang. It sneaks in quietly, like the sunrise you don't notice until your room is already bright. For me, it came one chilly evening in Aarhus, when I stopped by a small grocery store after work. The cashier, a young Danish woman with a kind smile, said, "Hi there. How was your day?" Usually I'd freeze or mumble something too short. But this time, something inside me, maybe all those mirror talks and slow listening sessions, decided to speak first. I smiled and said clearly, "It was good, thank you. I'm learning to enjoy the cold here." She laughed and replied, "You'll get used to it, we all do." It was a simple, meaningless conversation to her. But to me, it was everything. For the first time, I didn't rehearse before speaking. I didn't feel like a student or an outsider. I felt like me, alive, calm, real. Walking home that night, I realized something beautiful. Love doesn't always return as a person. Sometimes it comes back as confidence. Because that's what I had lost after heartbreak. Not love itself, but the feeling that I was worth hearing. And English, in a strange, poetic way, became the bridge back to myself. Psychologists say confidence grows when your actions start proving your fears wrong. Every time you speak and survive the awkwardness, your brain rewrites the story. See? Nothing bad happened. That's exactly how I healed, sentence by sentence, mistake by mistake, smile by smile. Soon I started joining English meetups in the city. I read short stories out loud. I even volunteered to guide a group of tourists around the harbor. My voice still shook sometimes, but this time it shook with excitement, not fear. And I understood fluency isn't perfection. It's self-acceptance in motion. It's the courage to be seen while you're still learning. That night before sleeping, I whispered to myself in the mirror again, "You did well today." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. The mirror told me the truth. It happened quietly on an ordinary morning. The same mirror, the same cold light, the same face, but this time I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone who had walked through fear and found her own reflection waiting on the other side. I smiled and said, "Good morning." And for once it sounded perfect, not because my pronunciation was flawless, but because it was honest. You see, the mirror doesn't lie. It shows you who you are, but also who you've been avoiding. For months I had looked into it searching for confidence, but what it really gave me was truth. That healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to yourself, one word, one voice, one act of courage at a time. I thought learning English again was just about improving my skills. But it wasn't. It was about learning to love the person speaking. The one who still stumbles, still forgets words, but no longer hides. Now every morning I stand in front of that mirror, not to fix my hair, but to remind myself that I'm still growing. I look into my own eyes and say something new each day. I'm proud of you. You sound better. You're enough. Because maybe the real language of fluency isn't English or Danish. It's self-compassion. So if you've ever looked in the mirror and felt like you've lost yourself, please know this. You can find your way back. Not through perfect grammar, but through gentle persistence. Through showing up, even when your voice trembles. When you dare to speak, to listen, to try again. You're already rewriting the story your reflection tells. The mirror finally told me the truth. I was never broken. I was just becoming fluent in a new kind of love, the kind that begins with me.